Hey guys, today I'm going to go over the changes with the most recent update to the Liberator and talk a little bit about how I feel in regards to them. There are some things I like and some things that I find to be questionable decisions. I wanted to wait a couple of days to do this so that hopefully things would settle down a bit and I would be able to have a firmer grasp on what, if anything, has changed. So, starting out, I'll talk about the new weapons. Other than the Hyena Tail Gun, I don't really have any footage of these new weapons because I haven't actually bought them. I used them fairly extensively on tests against some opponents to try and get a feel for them, and I found that neither the Spur or the Duster was an effective weapon for any common situations I ran into, so I was really unable to gather any interesting footage. When I stock up a few more certs, I'll see about getting them and trialing them more extensively, just in case I'm missing something about them. But for now, if you want a TLDR, should I get any of the new Liberator weapons, I'm going to have to say in general no. None of them are worth the price at the moment in my opinion versus the other options you have, except maybe the Hyenas. But let's talk about why they're lacking, starting out with the new nose gun, the L24R Spur. The Spur is essentially a vector variant that trades some of the DPS and velocity of the vector for the ability to free look aim in the cockpit. At first, this sounds like something that would be very helpful for fighting ESFs, but it really isn't. To begin with, the lower bullet velocity makes leading much more difficult. In addition, using free look actually puts you at a significant disadvantage against ESFs since the Liberator is slower to turn, and using free look means you're not actually following the target. What this leads to is ESFs outmaneuvering you quite easily and getting into the blind spot of the Liberator. The only way to really use this weapon is in a head-to-head duel, without free look, at which point the vector is a better choice anyway. Now, the one area where the Spur is better is pursuing targets at medium range. The free look makes it slightly easier to track targets that are running from you while maintaining the highest forward momentum you can in order to keep up with them. However, I don't really see this as a redeeming quality that makes up for the downfalls of the weapon. The Spur really feels like a primarily ground assault weapon, and what I would like to see done to it to make me consider it useful is to decrease the overall DPS and most of the stats while giving it a small AoE splash radius similar to that of a Shredder. This would give it more of an anti-infantry role, which really suits the free look aiming much better than fighting fast-moving air targets. The next weapon is the D75 Duster. The Duster is essentially a Zephyr on steroids with an atrocious cone of fire and a velocity not much better than a dumbfire. I feel that overall this is probably the most worthless of the new weapons. It does have a 10-round magazine, and both the direct and splash damage are quite respectable. However, after firing just one or two shots, the cone of fire blooms to the point where you literally have no control over where the rounds will go. Other than single-firing the weapon or being point-blank over a target, you have little to no chance of actually hitting what you're aiming for. At a medium altitude, if you mag dump the Duster, it feels like you're lucky to have half your rounds even land in the same hex. The second damning trait of the Duster is the velocity. It fires at 100 meters per second, and to give you some perspective, that's only 20 meters faster than the default dumbfire rocket, and it's half the velocity of the already slow Zephyr. These two things combined make the weapon all but worthless. I can see very few situations where the Duster would be significantly better than the Zephyr, and dozens where it would be significantly worse. I would strongly advise that you spend neither certs nor station cash on this weapon until it has been improved. To improve the weapon, I would simply like a reduced cone of fire and a better velocity. Small steps though. Reduce the cone of fire by maybe 25% to begin with, and give it another 50 meters per second of velocity. It will still have much more bloom and a much lower velocity than the Zephyr, but that might make it slightly less situational and more usable. All that being said though, I think that the weapon idea in general is both a bad one and rather lazy. It takes an already very situational weapon and simply makes it even more situational than before while not drastically improving its effectiveness at that situation. If I had my choice, I would have rather seen the proposed VS belly gun be moved forward as an NS option, something with a higher accuracy and rate of fire with lower individual damage like a Proton PPA. That would have been a belly gun that could have actually competed with the Zephyr, as it would have catered to an entirely different playstyle. The final weapon is the Hyena Tail Gun, and it's the only new weapon that I can begrudgingly say isn't an entire waste of money. It functions identically to Coyote missiles. The missile it fires is dumbfired, but they lock if they get close to enemy aircraft. They do decent damage to ESFs and are good at close to mid-range. However, the low velocity limits their effectiveness against actively dodging opponents or opponents at longer ranges. That being said, they definitely do have their uses, and I've had a decent amount of fun playing with them. At point blank range, they melt ESFs pretty quickly. It takes about a clip and a half. All in all, I feel that they are fairly balanced, and while I'm not a huge fan of lock-on weaponry, I do think that SOE did a respectable job of balancing them. So, now that the weapons are out of the way, let's talk about the two other big changes to the Liberator. The first one is that the tailgun angles have been drastically increased. The tailgun can now actually aim further forward than the belly gun and offers a complete range of motion from the back of the Liberator to anywhere underneath of it. While I really do like that the angles were increased, I feel this was a bit overkill. The tailgun really should not be aiming further forward than the belly gun, and that needs to be toned down. For argument's sake, I'll just throw out that putting the angles about in between what it was pre-patch and now would be a good place to start and go from there. The next change, and probably the biggest one, is the change to Dalton damage and what Composite Armor does. Daltons used to do about 65 to 70% damage on a Liberator, which allowed them to two-shot a full health Liberator. Now they do about 45%, and after 2 shots, they will set a stock Liberator on fire. However, Composite Armor was also changed to both resist the splash damage from a Dalton as well as tank rounds. A Liberator with max rank Composite Armor can now take 4 Daltons, with the 5th blowing it up. It takes 4 Vanguard AP shots, 7 Prowler AP shots, and 5 Mag Rider AP shots to kill a Liberator. That is, to generalize, about a 100% increase in the shots required to kill. And truth be told, it's a bit too much. What's really odd about all of this in my mind is that the flak resistance of Composite Armor was raised by only 2%, which is quite literally insignificant. In my mind, it was really keeping with the long-running tradition of nerfing high-skill weapons and playstyles while leaving low-skill options as effective as always. Hitting a Liberator with flak requires very little skill, while reliably hitting it with an AP or Dalton round requires a significant amount. Now, I was in favor of decreasing the damage that tank guns did to a Liberator, but not by any significant amount. Perhaps let them survive 1 more round, but not 2 or 3 more. So, what would I like to see change to bring this more into balance? First of all, a stock Liberator should still be 2-shot by a Dalton. Perhaps lower the Dalton damage so that it does exactly 50% to a Liberator, meaning that a fire suppression in between would allow you to be set on fire or maybe survive with barely enough health to not be on fire. This would allow a little more survivability, but it wouldn't make fire suppression a way to easily survive 2 Daltons. Secondly, lower the resistance of Composite Armor versus Daltons and tank shells to a point where it allows them to survive 1 more Dalton or tank shell, 2 if it's from a Prowler. This will still be a significant advantage, but it will also leave a little more room for variation. At the moment, a Shredder Walker Liberator is the new king of the skies. Throw Composite Armor and fire suppression on it, and you can take on 2 Dalton Liberators easily, because you can essentially just space tank Daltons while your Shredder and Walker melt them. The final thing for me would be to make Composite Armor resist flak by at least 15% maxed out, and maybe even give it a little bit of resistance to lock-ons as well. In return for this, have Composite Armor lower your maximum speed by about 15 to 20 kph. This will cater Composite Armor towards much more of an anti-ground role. I'm actually surprised that SOE hasn't used speed or maneuverability debuffs to balance things in the past. But especially for the Liberator, I feel it would be a great way to go. Give Composite Armor Liberators much more power to engage ground while reducing their effectiveness at quick escapes or defending them against aircrafts. So yeah, I mean, I like the ideas of changes to Composite Armor, but they definitely went a little bit overkill, and if they would have left it on test a little bit longer, I think people would have given them more feedback and they could have toned that down before going live. That being said, it definitely does need to be. In addition to the larger changes, they had a couple of smaller ones as well. They gave a buff to Afterburners on the Liberator, which approximately doubled the amount of time you need to be burning with them. They also gave a slight buff to lock-on time while using the Echo Stealth, which, while pretty insignificant, was a nice off. The one thing that I was incredibly disappointed to not see in this update was base turret resistance to Tank Buster not being lowered. It was one of the things that Tank Buster was extremely good at, and in talking to other Liberator pilots, one of the things we were really hoping that SOE would do. Now, with all of the changes out of the way, I'm going to go on a bit of a personal tangent about this update and what my overall impressions of it are. So, if you don't want to hear me talk about how much I love Liberators for a couple of minutes, then thanks for watching this far, and I hope you found this somewhat helpful or enjoyable to watch. So, what are my overall impressions of the Liberator update now that I've had a few days to play with the new weapons and see how things are settling out? I think it could have been worse, but all in all I'm pretty disappointed. I was looking forward to this update for a very long time. I had tons of ideas for it. I had videos planned to start putting out those ideas when it went on to test server. Then, after just a couple of days on test server, without seeming to listen to any feedback, the changes went live. Really, nothing on my wish list was granted, and instead a bunch of things no one really asked for were implemented, and a bunch of essentially useless weapons were released. Now, I'm generally very supportive of SOE and will defend what they're trying to do, and in general, I feel they're doing a quite respectable job at listening to the community. I also feel that a lot of their recent updates have been relatively good and have given smooth transition. However, like I said, I really was not impressed with this update. The landing gear bug that forces you to land after pulling the Liberator up is back with a vengeance, after being essentially gone for months. There's invulnerable players and vehicles appearing almost hourly, and many players, myself included, are experiencing really strange hit detection. I wish that this update would have been out on test server for another week or two like the ESF one was, to allow people a little more time to try out the new mechanics and give feedback. All of the grand ideas that they were throwing around about Empire-specific belly guns, and drop seats, and other interesting mechanics seem to have just been thrown to the wayside, in favor of simply recycling existing mechanics from other places. The most disappointing thing about all of this is the fact that this was probably the only chance Liberators have of getting a real refresh for at least a year or so, and we got nothing real out of it. The most significant change to Liberator gameplay came as a result of changing a couple of resist types for Composite Armor, and the angles the tailgun can aim, and that could have been done with relative ease at any point, not to mention the fact that both of them are likely to and should get hit with the nerf hammer any time now. Now, since I don't like to end on a low note, I'll talk a little bit about the new kill screen with the patch. When it works correctly, which, let's be honest, isn't all the time by any stretch of the imagination, I really like it. The information about your killers and your progress towards Araxiums is a nice touch, as is the ability to stay on it as long as you like. The minimap showing your killer's position, I do have mixed feelings about. I don't really anticipate that it will change things that much. A good player likely knows with about as much accuracy as the depth screen shows where they got killed from anyways, and a bad player likely won't have the ability to act on the knowledge they're given. I would like to perhaps only have it shown if you're killed with something that isn't a headshot, as the only people I see this having a huge effect on is snipers. If you're an SMG infiltrator, or light assault, or any class with a suppressor behind enemy lines, you should be moving around a fair amount anyways, so it doesn't really matter if the person you kill knows where you were when you killed them. You'll likely not be there when they respawn anyways. So, if nothing else, it is a nice way to at least give new players some feeling of control, even though I don't really feel it was needed. Also, the pro tips. Please remove the condescending ones from it. They're pretty funny the first time or two, but after seeing them 20 times, they're just really condescending, and it's usually not a good idea to be an ass to the people that they're giving you money. So, leave the tips as actual tips, and maybe give the ability for people to disable them. I don't really need someone to remind me to stay away from grenades. I've played the game for an hour or two. But all in all, I really like the new depth screen, and people that are screaming bloody murder about the easy mode COD kill cam, they need to go get some Vaseline and apply it liberally to their epic case of butthurt.
It begins.
But yeah, that's really all I've got on the update, so thanks for watching and enduring my little ending tangent, and have a lovely day, evening, time, life, wherever you're at right now.
Flak below, careful. I gotta pull back. I'm already getting hit by flak.
Got him on me.
Alright, turning to engage. One almost down. One down.
That was fucking close, man. Woo!
Other one down. I got one on me now. JK. Get one clipped.